Hey guys, enjoy your morning coffee. I'm here to talk about a breakdown to a tweet, process communication, and sexual diabetes. If you don't know what all that stuff means, hold on to your butts. We'll explain it all here in a bit. So this video is here to break down a tweet to illustrate a point and deliver a message that benefits a lot of guys. I talk a lot on my channel, my blog, and my other places about mental models, and this is a prime example of how they can affect you in the real world. If you don't know, a mental model is a narrative structure that allows you to look at the world and anchor your decisions. If you're still a bit confused, we're going to get into two of them right now. First, I'm going to tell you a story. When we were in our evolutionary beginnings, the examples of our species that ate simple carbohydrates and dense calorie foods tended to survive, and the ones that didn't died off. And so we bred those through the generations, and now here we are today, hardwired for something that was evolutionarily good for us. Here's the problem though. We live in a land of chocolate cake. We've managed to take sugarcane, which you would normally have to chew for 3-4 minutes to get some calories out of, and we've condensed it into its raw chocolate cake form. Problem with that is we're still having that instinctual hard wiring right now for eating simple carbs. And in this sense, we're getting the same thing, which I refer to as sexual diabetes. I'm going to reference a post here from one of our main red-pilled posters. His name's Whisper. Well, the name he goes by is Whisper. And he has a post called Giant Heads, where he breaks down the evolutionary psychological reason for the mental models we have hardwired into us. The post is going to be in the description, so I suggest you read it. But the key points to take away from it is that men have an instinctive need to protect and care for women. Women instinctively have a desire to submit to men. Now here's where the mental models come in. If you take the white picket fence or the TRADCON mental model, what you're doing is you are maximizing the male protective instinct through indoctrination, propaganda, whatever word you want to use for it, influence, for the benefit of women. Which makes sense. Back in the day, if you had a culture and you didn't have any women, your culture died off. So the ones that tended to survive and thrive throughout the years were the ones that treated women as a valuable, resource. I don't want to sound dehumanizing there, but essentially that. Men were disposable, women were not. And so the ones that survived tended to do that. They tended to defer to the protection of women, which is great, except for we're now in the Industrial Revolution. We've, for the most part, technologically advanced to the point that there are no longer dangers. The problem with this comes with the advent of the feminine imperative or feminism. In this case, it's an attempt to minimize the female submissive instinct, but to maximize the male protective instinct. It's where I often tell you that feminism isn't an ideology, it's a tactic or a strategy. If you'll notice, there's a reason you ask 7 different people, you get 7 different definitions. It's because there is no solidified, concrete ideology there. It's a bunch of girls who have realized that if they continue to use the tools of shame, tap into the innate need of men to protect women, that you'll generally get things you want. And so they're just maximizing their sexual strategy in that sense. Meanwhile, the traditional conservative white picket fence mental model is one that automatically defers to that. So there's a bunch of men who have their mental models geared towards protecting as many women as possible, and a large amount of female mental models that are geared towards exploiting that for their own benefit. So for the modern man, this is not a helpful way to live. Another post here, where the title is, and don't listen like a spurg either. Spurg being a shorthand version of Asperger's, or somebody who's overly literal. Nothing that you're going to hear in a red pill context is to be taken literally, except for the stuff that is. The point is, it's up to you to decide what's to be taken literally and what isn't. How do you do that? Well, that's where you got to use your brain. A lot of the posts and a lot of the writing is specifically structured in order to tap into somebody's errant mental models, cause some cognitive dissonance, and to a lesser extent, create that neuroplasticity that allows a guy to understand and build himself newer and healthier mental models. The same way that the anger phase comes after a trauma, which is a guy whose wife leaves him and takes the kids, a girlfriend who cheats on him. Any kind of trauma like that will actually build neuroplasticity within a guy's head, so he reassesses the world and builds himself healthier mental models. So in the absence of that, we have these kind of things here, which we refer to as, triggering posts. I think this one's also from Whisper. The literal content is not the message, and you're going to see where this is coming into play in a minute here. The result is not dry information. It's what you do with what you now know. Now, the problem when you grasp too strongly onto certain mental models is you have an inability to generalize or think outside the box. And so the point of a tweet I'm going to pull up here in a second is to point out the problem with errant mental models. In this case, guys are going to hear the content of a message and they're either going to take it literally or reject it altogether. But that's not the point of it. It's not the intent behind the words. It's not to end a conversation. It's to start one. It's to get you thinking. Here it is. If she's 35 and divorced or single, she's a end of story. Oh, but he did. Yeah, she picked him. She married him. She left him. He was the same guy throughout. So what changed? You look at this one, you can take the serious literal message of it, which is I'm saying every girl that's above the age of 35 who's either divorced and single has screwed up from some major point in her life. That's a very broad statement. I obviously couldn't know that. There's no studies that suggest it. So why did I say that? And this was a way for people who follow this account to see this stuff happening in real time, real examples from other people. I could tell you how this is going to play out till I'm blue in the face. And yeah, you'll maybe believe me, but you won't understand how I got that information. But here, we're going to see how people do exactly what I suggested they do there. And they take this literally. There's going to be two types of responses. There's the ones from women and the one from men. First thing here, shout out to Kayla Michelle. Awesome account to follow. She's the only person I see that's really dealing with fitness from a female perspective. So for a lot of guys who've been working on their maps for a length of time, they start to notice their wives want to get into shape too. Their girlfriends want to get into shape. But the only problem is the only thing they can find is Mark Ripto stuff, and they have a hard time getting into it. So I would strongly suggest you throw them her way and see if she can help out on that one. I'm going to add links to her Twitter and Instagram in the description. Like I said, awesome girl. So here's the thing here. She says she's 30 and in a long-term relationship. She divorced in her early 20s. She didn't take a cent of his. She was faithful. But she's the screw up? Right. To which, obviously, I say there, it sounds like it doesn't apply to you. And here's the point. I'm telling you that a girl divorced or single by 35 is a screw up. That's because if somebody reaches the age of 35 and they have lacked the skills for that long in order to get and keep a man, well, then there's probably an issue there. Something that needs addressing. And she suggested herself, she thinks that, she says that being divorced in her early 20s means that she's a screw up. But if you'll notice, very easily able to get into a second long-term relationship. So that kind of proves the point. By the time she hits 35, even if this second LTR doesn't work out, she's not going to have a problem because she's a normal, functioning, well-adjusted girl. She's got girl game. Looks good, takes care of herself. Like, you get the idea. So I actually love the female responses of this because if you'll notice, they're much more understanding of process communication. And this is really a secondary meaning of this whole thing where girls always understand subtext. It's what we talk about when we speak about womenese, context, nuance, emotional intelligence, whatever word you want to throw to it. Women innately understand this, and it's a skill that guys have to learn if they expect to have any game with women, not just sexually, but in general. The thing you'll notice from girls is a lot of the time they see it in their own family dynamics. In her case, she saw her mother doing the same thing. Absolutely horrible from a relationship perspective, lacking the self-awareness. The key points is the girls see this and they understand it too. Like, most who are self-aware will understand whether they want a relationship or not. Having the ability to lock down a man before you're 35 is a skill that any normal functioning woman would have. I mean, we could say guys too, but I'm not going to play the equalization thing here. You'll see the first guy, boobers. I suppose sweeping generalizations are provocative, but also rather naive. Like I said, he took it literally like a spurg, outright dismissed it, and then attacked me. And this guy here, again, not crapping on these guys, I'm illustrating a point. He took it literally. I'm afraid so. By the time she's 35, she's more than had enough time and enough of a kick from her epiphany programming to lock down a guy she can stay with. He took a bunch of different concepts, the wall, the epiphany phase. Rollo talks about them. I won't be able to do them justice in a couple minutes here, but he took it all literally, and that's not really the point of this either. This one here, program, there are significant hormonal changes that can cause personality in a man to change between his 20s and his 30s. Again, the point of that was not that men don't change, but that was his instant reaction to it because he had to reject this outright because he took it literally. Same with Tinker. How very simple. You must know everything. CD Bear here. He understands at the very end. Can we finally add an all men are like that to compensate for this predicted response? So here we are. CD, this video's for you, buddy. This is another one about taking it literally. At this point, he assumes, and then again, this is that broken women fallacy where you assume that if a girl can't do it, she's broken. I don't like saying broken because it's a very dehumanizing and term that's lacking of nuance. Yeah, she may be crazy. There is most likely something wrong, but it's not a defect. People can act in all certain ways, and the problem with DSM ranked disorders is they aren't saying that somebody is deficient. There's no brain damage. There's no medical condition. It just means their behavior is out of whack with the way the general population does things. So yeah, he's kind of right, but you can't take it literally like that. And again, living out of mom's basement at 14, whatever it is, it sounds personal. You get the gist of it here. I'm going to show you another thing, and this is going to be entertaining. Anybody who's been in the red pill for a while, you'll probably know where this is coming from. The unbearable triteness of hating. This is something that Royce, one of the 3 R's of the manosphere, the very first guy in the red pill, along with Roosh and Rollo, pointed out that anytime he would start talking about female nature in less than a positive role, he would always get the same typical responses. Now, I would suggest you guys go through this one on your own. I'm just going to go to the first 3 here. Or I guess the first 2 are really the only ones that matter. So right there, he talks about the bitter beta hate. In other words, you're a bitter misogynist. So just an attempt to dismiss the guy by calling him defective, attacking his character. Translation from that is, your words make me weep from every pore. And that's the point. It's not an actual character attack. It's not a condemnation. There's no facts in there. There's nothing you can take from it other than the other person's experiencing an attack to his ego or his mental models. And he needs to dismiss you as a human being or dehumanize you in order to square that circle. Second part here, nobody who writes about the horrible things you could possibly write do well with women. And that's the expectation bias hate. It's entirely possible to like any woman. I mean, as long as she's acting right, generally a good person and not treating you too badly. But it's not a monolithic thing. And that's the point where we were getting through, and I'll sum it up at the end. You can't follow the trad mental model of innate protection of women as a whole because it's being weaponized against you. And I guarantee you all those guys don't think they're doing it. So I'm going to end this video now. And we're going to break down everything with as clear an after-action report as I can give. The point of that tweet was to explain, or not to explain, to show how men have an innate need to protect women, and women have an innate need to exploit that protection for their own gain. The purpose of these red pill points is that you have to think for yourself. What is the process behind this tweet? Why did I suggest that? Is it true? How can I know it's true? and what you can take away from it. So for a guy, if your first impulse upon reading something like that is to automatically attack the other person and take the side of a woman that doesn't even exist, that's the key point here. This isn't talking about anybody. This is a very random generalization, which it's true in the horseshoes and hand grenades sense. A lot of the times, if you find a girl who divorced and still single by 35, you're often going to see a lot of baggage attached to that. So it's a nice heuristic. It's not speaking for everybody. It's not scientific rigor. But it's usually the kind of thing that you can understand and internalize as the norm. So when an exception does happen, you can take advantage of that. And I'm sure there's going to be a ton of examples of guys who find a 35-year-old woman who's been single, who's actually pretty well put together. But the thing is, they're not going to know the difference between her and Karen, the girl who took the kids, who's absolutely psychotic, if they don't understand mental models are not helpful to them. And so you approach each woman instead of the innate need to protect, you approach each one as a human being. And then as you get to understand, some people are good fits for you, some people are bad fits for you. Some people have behavior that's outside of the norm, or what we would call a disorder, and some people are within normal bounds of that disorder. So once you start looking at them as individuals and not as a monolith in need of protection, you're going to shed your sexual diabetes and actually start to look at women the way they actually are. The beauty of that is once you're looking at them objectively like this, you can actually learn the hypergamy. They want to find the best that they can get. And then you better understand how that can be you. At the same time, you also understand she has to add value to you as well. And you can't get there while you're worshiping women as a demographic. The white picket fence mental model, or TRADCON, is a way to maximize the male instinct for protection of women. The feminist, or female imperative mental model, is a way to minimize the female protective instinct and exploit the male instinct. And then again, shout out to Kayla. Link to hers in the description, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.